There comes a moment in life when holding on becomes heavier than letting go, when the weight of past disappointments, broken expectations, and emotional attachments begins to suffocate the very person you are becoming. This message isn't about forgetting what happened, but about freeing yourself from what tries to keep you stuck in a chapter you have outgrown. It's about reclaiming your strength, rewriting your narrative, and stepping forward with courage, even when your heart still remembers what your mind is trying to move past. Freedom doesn't always feel like celebration in the beginning. Sometimes it feels like loss, like silence, like unknown territory. But in that very space, transformation begins, clarity rises, and the version of you that has been waiting on the inside finally gets the chance to breathe. This is a call to stop rehearsing the pain and start rehearsing your future. Stop allowing your past to negotiate your future, because every time you let old memories, old relationships, or old failures speak louder than your vision, you unintentionally trade your destiny for familiarity. The past has a way of sounding convincing because it carries the voice of experience. But just because something has history with you doesn't mean it has permission to define you. There are people who still see you from the version they met years ago, and if you aren't careful, you start performing for their memory instead of showing up for your future. You start shrinking your potential to match what they expect, when deep inside, you know you have outgrown that season. The danger of letting the past negotiate is that it always bargains with your identity using guilt, what ifs, and emotional attachment. It whispers that moving on means you're ungrateful, that choosing yourself is selfish, that outgrowing people means you've changed too much. But growth is supposed to change you. Healing is supposed to shift you. Freedom is supposed to make you unfamiliar. Even to yourself, there are moments when God will pull you out of places that once felt comfortable, because comfort can become a prison when your purpose is calling you somewhere higher. You cannot take yesterday's mindset into tomorrow's opportunities. Some people stay stuck not because the door is locked, but because they keep negotiating with the past, asking for permission to leave what no longer serves them. They wait for closure. They wait for validation. They wait for someone to say, it's okay to move on now, not realizing that waiting is just another form of bondage when your spirit already knows it's time to go. The past doesn't release you, you release yourself. The moment you understand that freedom is a personal decision, not a community agreement, you stop waiting for everyone to understand your transformation. There will be people who don't like the new boundaries you set because the old you made everything easy for them. The old you tolerated disrespect, accepted crumbs, and made excuses for why they couldn't give you what you deserved. But the new you understands value. The new you recognizes that access to your energy is a privilege, not a right. When you let the past negotiate, you start explaining your worth to people who benefit from underestimating you. You start trying to prove you're worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of being chosen, when worth was never something to be proven, only embraced. Walking into your future means no longer arguing with people about your value. It means no longer shrinking to be accepted. It means no longer waiting for people to catch up to your healing before you step into it fully. The past will remind you of every failure, every heartbreak, and every mistake, not to torture you, but to keep you loyal to an identity that no longer fits. When you begin to dream again, that voice will rise and say, remember the last time you tried. When you start to love yourself again, it will whisper, but what if they leave like the others? This is why negotiation with the past is dangerous. It will always present fear as protection. It will make you believe that staying the same is safer than becoming new. But safety is not the same as purpose. Comfort is not the same as calling. You can't heal while holding hands with what broke you, and you can't walk into the future while constantly glancing over your shoulder to check if the past approves. True freedom comes when you understand that the past can inform you, but it cannot instruct you. It can remind you of where you've been, but it cannot direct where you're going. Every time you choose to speak life over your future, instead of replaying the pain of your past, you take your power back. Every time you stop explaining your transformation to people committed to misunderstanding you, you take your identity back. Every time you release the need to be who you were and boldly step into who you are becoming, you take your destiny back. Choosing emotional detachment is one of the most powerful acts of self-respect a person can make. take, because it means you have finally stopped begging for peace in places that only offered you confusion. Detachment doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you care too much about your own well-being to keep pouring energy into situations that drain your spirit. Many people confuse detachment with coldness, but in truth, it is clarity. When your heart has been stretched by disappointment and your mind has grown weary from overthinking, detachment becomes the moment you say, I choose me. You stop chasing explanations, you stop rehearsing what went wrong, and you stop trying to convince people to value what they never truly saw. Emotional detachment is not about walking away in anger, it is about walking away in alignment with your peace. There are seasons in life where you realize that constantly trying to be understood by someone who is committed to misunderstanding you is a silent form of self-betrayal. You try to communicate your needs, but your words get twisted. You try to express your heart, but it gets dismissed. And somewhere between proving your worth and suppressing your truth, you slowly begin to lose sight of who you are. Emotional detachment steps in as a rescue mission for your soul. It tells you that you no longer have to stay loyal to someone else's comfort while betraying your own healing. When you detach, you stop needing people to agree with your evolution. You stop editing your personality just to remain acceptable. You stop sacrificing your peace at the altar of their approval. Detachment teaches you that peace is not found in being chosen by others, but in finally choosing yourself. There were moments where you gave too many second chances, not because they deserved it, but because you hoped they would finally see your heart. You stayed longer than you should have, thinking your love could convince them to change, but love is not supposed to feel like begging. Respect is not supposed to feel like a reward, and your presence should never feel like a compromise. Emotional detachment is the realization that you can love someone and still release them. It is the understanding that holding on does not prove loyalty if it costs you your identity. Detachment says, I refuse to shrink myself to fit what makes others comfortable. It says, I can still wish you well, but I will not wait for you to see my value before I walk in it fully. It's the quiet strength of knowing that separation is sometimes the only path to self-preservation. People often think that detachment means bitterness, but in reality, it is the birth of inner freedom. It removes the emotional hooks that once had you tied to people, opinions, and outcomes you couldn't control. Detachment allows you to show up fully without being controlled by how others respond. You no longer spiral when someone pulls away because your stability is no longer rooted in their presence. You no longer feel the need to chase closure because you understand that closure is a personal decision, not a delivered apology. Emotional detachment teaches you how to love without losing yourself, how to give without abandoning your boundaries, and how to care without collapsing under the weight of unmet expectations. Some people won't like your detachment because your emotional availability was their advantage. They were comfortable when your validation depended on their approval. But the moment you detach, you take your power back. They may say you've changed, and they're right. You have changed. You no longer argue to be heard. You no longer lower your standards to feel included, and you no longer settle for half. Love just to avoid being alone. Detachment shifts your posture. Instead of chasing, you attract. Instead of forcing conversations, you let silence speak. Instead of needing to be proven right, you choose peace over pride. Detachment is not a wall. It is a boundary made of wisdom and healing. When you begin to detach emotionally, everything around you starts to reveal its true nature. Relationships that were built on convenience begin to fade. People who only valued access to you rather than connection with you grow distant. And while that may feel like loss at first, it is actually alignment. Emotional detachment removes what your heart clung to out of fear so that your spirit can rise in truth. It's not about becoming heartless. It's about finally having a heart that beats in rhythm with your purpose rather than in response to someone else's inconsistency. Healing begins the moment you choose yourself, because for so long you have been conditioned to choose others first, to put their comfort above your peace and their happiness above your own restoration. There comes a point where you realize that constantly pouring into others while neglecting your own soul is not compassion, it is depletion. Healing does not start with time. It starts with a decision to no longer ignore the parts of you that are hurting, a decision to stop numbing your pain just to appear strong, a decision to stop pretending you are okay simply because others are comfortable with your silence. Choosing yourself is not selfish, it is sacred. It is the moment you acknowledge that your heart deserves the same tenderness you freely give to others. There are people who have spent years waiting for someone to come and fix what they never had the courage to face. They hope love will erase the pain, success will silence the insecurities, or new environments will make old wounds irrelevant. But healing does not chase you. It waits for your permission. It will not invade your life until you are willing to confront the truth you have been avoiding. Choosing yourself means finally looking at your reflection without the filter of survival. It means admitting that you have been functioning but not thriving, smiling but not fulfilled, present but not whole. Healing requires honesty, and honesty requires courage. It takes courage to say, I am not okay, but I am ready to be free. It takes courage to admit that certain patterns have followed you not because life is unfair, but because you kept ignoring the parts of you that needed attention. Choosing yourself also means choosing boundaries. There are wounds that never healed because you kept reopening them by giving repeated access to people who never deserved it. You kept allowing conversations that triggered your anxiety. You kept returning to environments that made you doubt your value. And every time you stayed, you told your heart that its pain was a price it had to pay to feel wanted. Healing begins the moment you say, I do not have to bleed to be loved. Boundaries are not walls to keep love out. They are gates to keep peace in. They protect your soul from being drained by those who benefit from your lack of limits. When you choose yourself, you stop asking for permission to protect your peace. You understand that anyone who is offended by your healing was benefiting from your brokenness. There is a version of you that exists beyond the trauma, the disappointment, and the expectations of others. That version is waiting for you to stop living in survival mode. Many people confuse survival with strength, but surviving simply means you learned how to adapt to pain. Healing means you are no longer willing to build a life around it. Choosing yourself invites you to step out of autopilot and become intentional about your joy, your growth, and your inner peace. You start to notice the conversations that drain you, the habits that keep you stagnant, and the thoughts that sabotage your progress. Healing is not an event. It is a daily choice to show up for yourself, even when it feels easier to fall back into familiar pain. When you choose yourself, you begin to understand that not everyone can go with you into your healed season. Some relationships were built around your broken version, and when you start healing, the foundation of those relationships begins to shake. People who were comfortable with your silence will feel uncomfortable with your voice. People who thrived on your insecurity will feel threatened by your confidence. And people who were attracted to your wounds may not recognize you when you start to glow from within. Choosing yourself means being okay with the outgrowing environments that were never meant to sustain your destiny. Healing does not always look like joy in the beginning. Sometimes it looks like distance, like quiet, like separation from what once felt familiar. The moment you choose yourself, your spirit starts to realign. You begin to attract peace instead of chaos, clarity instead of confusion, and authenticity instead of performance. You stop chasing things that drain you and start cultivating things that feed your soul. Healing teaches you that you do not have to beg for love, beg for respect, or beg for space. You simply have to choose yourself, and everything that was never meant for you will fall away. It will not always feel comfortable, but it will always be worth it. Closed doors are not rejection, they are divine direction, because sometimes what feels like a painful ending is actually a protective rerouting. There are moments when you are convinced that certain opportunities, relationships, or environments are meant for you, and when they fall apart, it feels like a personal failure. You question your worth, you question your timing, and you question if something is wrong with you. But what if the door didn't close because you were unworthy, but because your purpose was too big to fit through that doorway? Sometimes closure is a gift disguised as loss. What you thought you needed would have hindered your growth, but because you were emotionally invested, you couldn't see that settling was becoming a silent form of self-destruction. When a door closes, it disrupts your comfort. It interrupts your plans and forces you into unknown territory. The discomfort creates a space that demands either fear or faith. You can either interpret it as rejection and allow it to shame you, or you can interpret it as divine direction and allow it to shape you. Closed doors reveal what you truly believe about yourself. If you see it as rejection, you internalize it and think you are not enough. If you see it as direction, you understand that you are being guided towards something greater. Closed doors expose how attached you were to your plan and how willing you are to surrender to a higher one. They show you whether your identity was in what you were doing or in who you were becoming. There have been times when you prayed for peace, but then tried to force your way back into situations that disturbed your spirit. You asked for clarity, but when the answer came in the form of a closed door, you called it unfair. You asked for growth, but when growth required separation, you called it painful. The truth is, divine direction rarely looks like what you expected. It doesn't come with explanations or step-by-step previews. It often comes through disruption. The closed door is not punishment, it is protection. It is protection from connections that would drain you, from environments that would limit you, from assignments that do not align with your destiny. There are people, places, and opportunities that looked appealing but were never designed to sustain your calling. And a closed door is mercy even when it feels like heartbreak. When you become attached to a specific outcome, you begin to lose flexibility in your spirit. You start clinging to what you thought your life should look like, and that attachment becomes a barrier to elevation. Closed doors break the illusion of control. They remind you that you were never meant to write the entire script alone. The delay you are frustrated about may be the preparation you desperately need. The opportunity you lost might be the very thing that would have distracted you from your true path. The relationship that ended might have kept you from discovering your identity outside of someone else's validation. Closed doors force reflection, and reflection births alignment. They cause you to sit with yourself and ask, was I pursuing this because it was mine or because it was familiar? Sometimes the most painful closed doors are the ones that come after you gave everything you had. It feels unfair when you poured love, effort, or loyalty into something only for it to end without explanation. But even then, direction is hidden within the disappointment. You were not created to keep knocking on doors that drain your energy. You were not meant to beg for a seat at tables that were never set with your name in mind. When a door closes, it is not the end of your story. It is a redirection toward a chapter that aligns with the strength you have gained through the process. Closed doors become powerful when you stop seeing them as endings and start seeing them as divine editing. Your life is being pruned, not punished. What falls away is making space for what is meant to be built. Pain tries to convince you that a closed door means you were forgotten. Fear tries to convince you that nothing better is coming, but direction whispers something different. It whispers that timing is real, alignment is necessary, and destiny cannot be rushed. A closed door does not just protect you from what isn't right, it prepares you for what is. It sharpens your discernment, it strengthens your resilience, and it teaches you to trust movement even when you cannot predict the outcome. The moment you stop fighting what has ended and start preparing for what is next, you step into a posture of expectation instead of desperation. Closed doors become less threatening when you understand that they are not a sign of rejection, but a sign that your future is being handled with intention. Peace is the proof that you've truly let go, because when your heart is still tied to the outcome of a situation, anxiety will always follow. You can say you've moved on, you can distance yourself physically, you can even pretend you are unaffected. But true release is not measured by distance or silence, it is measured by the state of your inner world. There are people who are far from what once hurt them, yet still carry the weight of it in their thoughts. Their mind replays conversations, their heart reheats pain, and their peace is constantly at war with their memories. But when you genuinely let go, something shifts. The need to argue fades. The desire to be understood loses its grip. The urge to check if they care disappears. Peace replaces the chaos that once lived in your chest, and that peace becomes the quiet confirmation that you are no longer chained to what once consumed you. Letting go is not just about releasing people. It is about releasing the version of yourself who stayed too long, who tolerated too much, who accepted less because they believed that was all they deserved. When you heal, you do not just walk away from the situation, you walk away from the mindset that kept you bound to it. Inner peace is not found by trying to fix what broke you. It is found by realizing that your healing is not dependent on someone else's apology. You stop waiting for closure that may never come. You stop tracking whether they regret losing you. You stop trying to prove that you were worth fighting for. Peace comes when you realize that your value is not lessened by someone's inability to see it. You do not need a response, a validation, or a confession from anyone to step into freedom. Your peace is your confirmation. There are moments when peace will feel unusual because chaos was once your normal. When you have lived in emotional survival mode for too long, calm can feel uncomfortable at first. You might even find yourself searching for something to worry about because your mind has been conditioned to associate love with tension. But peace is not the absence of emotion. Peace is stability in your spirit. It is knowing that you no longer have to anticipate disappointment, no longer have to monitor every word to avoid conflict, no longer have to shrink yourself to maintain a false sense of harmony. Peace doesn't just mean silence on the outside, it means silence on the inside. No more rehearsing arguments. No more building imaginary scenarios in your head. No more waking up with a heart full of what ifs. Peace arrives when you no longer feel the need to go back and explain what your growth already made clear, when your peace matters more than being right, more than being seen, and more than winning a conversation. You have stepped into maturity. You no longer take every misunderstanding as a personal attack. You no longer chase closure through long conversations that go in circles. You no longer hand out explanations to people who have already decided what they want to believe. Peace teaches you that silence can be more powerful than 100 perfectly crafted responses. You begin to choose stillness over reaction. You begin to choose emotional discipline over emotional display. True peace is not passive, it is powerful. It is a conscious decision to protect your energy from unnecessary battles. It is choosing to rise above what once triggered you. It is letting your healed posture speak louder than your wounded voice ever could. There are people who will mistake your peace for indifference. They will think your calm means you no longer care. But peace doesn't mean you forgot. It means you remembered yourself. It means you remembered your worth, your calling, your purpose, and your right to live without constant emotional turbulence. You can care and still choose distance. You can love and still choose silence. You can honor the past and still choose not to return to it. When peace enters your life, you lose interest in chaos, in gossip, in proving points, in fighting for spaces that do not honor your spirit. You stop rushing to respond and start allowing distance to do the speaking. You stop reacting to every trigger and start recognizing that not everything requires your energy. Peace becomes your filter for decisions. If it costs your peace, you don't entertain it. If it disturbs your spirit, you don't chase it. If it drains your soul, you don't justify it. The day you realize that your peace is your new standard, everything changes. You start to protect your space like it is sacred. You begin to prioritize rest without guilt. You start valuing your mental clarity more than your desire to be included. Peace makes you selective, not bitter. It makes you wise, not hardened. It teaches you that freedom is not just walking away. It is staying away without resentment, without anger, and without curiosity about what you left behind. Growth requires walking away without applause, because sometimes the path to becoming who you are meant to be will not be celebrated by the people who were comfortable with who you used to be. It is easy to walk away when you are praised for it, when people cheer your transformation and validate your decisions. But growth becomes real when you choose it even in silence, even when no one notices, even when those who benefited from your old patterns call you distant, prideful, or cold. Walking away is not just a physical act, it is an emotional decision to detach from the need to be understood. Growth means you are willing to disappoint expectations that no longer align with your purpose. It means you accept that evolving will sometimes make you the villain in someone else's story simply because you stopped playing the role that kept them comfortable. There are seasons where you will have to walk away from places where you were once celebrated because your soul no longer fits the environment. People may miss who you were because who you were made things easy for them. The old version of you said yes to everything. The old version of you tolerated disrespect in the name of loyalty. The old version of you stayed silent to keep peace. But growth comes with a decision to stop betraying yourself for the sake of being seen as agreeable. When you grow, you no longer prioritize being liked. You prioritize being aligned. You stop performing for acceptance and start honoring the truth that rises within you. Walking away without applause means you release the desire for others to validate your journey. You stop waiting for them to say, "I understand." Because your healing is not dependent on their comprehension. Some people are addicted to being praised for their transformation, but true transformation doesn't always come with admiration. Sometimes it comes with loneliness. The process of outgrowing environments often feels isolating because the conversations that once entertained you now feel empty. The circles that once made you feel important now feel draining. You start to crave depth, peace, and authenticity rather than attention, noise, and drama. That shift can create distance between you and what used to feel familiar. Growth will require you to walk alone at times, not because you are unloved, but because you are being recalibrated. Silence becomes your sanctuary, and peace becomes more valuable than popularity. Walking away without applause means you have matured to a point where internal alignment matters more than external approval. There will be moments where you are tempted to turn back just to prove your worth to those who doubted you. But growth is not about proving, it is about moving. It is about moving past the version of yourself that craved validation. It is about moving past the illusion that applause is a sign of purpose. Applause can be misleading. People will cheer for you when you do what benefits them, and they will criticize you when your evolution requires you to set boundaries. If you let applause guide your decisions, you will live a life controlled by the expectations of others rather than the calling within you. Walking away without applause removes the audience from your transformation. It refocuses you on the why behind your growth, not the reaction to it. When you stop performing for approval, your growth becomes authentic. Growth asks for quiet departures. You do not always need to make announcements. You do not always need to explain your shift. Some doors require you to close them gently without loud declarations. Walking away without applause means you trust that your future does not need public confirmation to be real. It is understanding that every step away from what drains you is a step toward what grows you. You do not have to argue about your change. You do not have to force anyone to understand your silence. The ones meant for your next season will recognize your transformation without demanding justification. You stop defending your boundaries because peace becomes your explanation. Walking away without applause also means releasing bitterness. You do not walk away to prove a point. You walk away to honor your peace. Growth does not seek revenge or validation. It seeks alignment. There is a quiet kind of strength that rises when you no longer need to be seen leaving to feel powerful. You can exit a room gracefully, without chaos, without announcements, without the need to be chased. You understand that closure does not always come with applause. Sometimes closure comes in the stillness of your own decision to move forward. Growth teaches you that separation is not always a sign of conflict. It can be a sign of elevation. Not every departure needs an audience. Not every transformation needs witnesses. Some breakthroughs happen in private, away from noise, away from praise, and it is in that sacred stillness that your true self begins to emerge.